And when I started in Formula One, I looked at the most difficult tracks to win on, and they are invariably the tracks that are very difficult to set up for. And there was Monaco, because Monaco's ridiculous. It's got so many hairpin bends where all you want is mechanical grip and no downforce at all.
Right.
And then you've got the curve through the tunnel and that flat out chicane in those days where you need all the downforce. So you don't know whether to set the car up soft and mechanical for grip or to be stable through the tunnel. So that was a nightmare.
Today's episode is brought to you in part by Off the Record. We love Off the Record. Of the 7 people who work at Westside Collector Car Storage, 2 of them have used Off the Record in the last week. Off the Record connects you with a qualified legal representative, a lawyer, in the jurisdiction that you got a ticket in. When you get pulled over, you don't say nothing. You keep your mouth shut. You hear? Keep your mouth shut. Don't admit to anything. Take the ticket. Call Off the Record. That's what you do. Off the Record will then assign an attorney to fight that ticket on your behalf. You don't have to go to court. And odds are you don't even hear from the court once you send that ticket to Off the Record. They have an amazing success rate. I get DMs all the time from people on Instagram, emails from people who say they used Off the Record and they made that ticket go away. It's delightful. Their success rate is incredible. Their coverage for the United States is incredible. And if you go to offtherecord.com/TST and make an account, or download the app, the Off the Record app, and use code TST10 on the Off the Record app, 10% off all legal services at least through the end of 2024. I don't see why this code wouldn't get renewed. We signed up with them for 3 years, but I'm sure the code will work past 2024 once we get there. But at least for now, this code, TST10 on the Off the Record app or offtherecord.com/TST is good for 10% off all legal services you book with Off the Record. Make the account now, save it in your phone. That way you know if you get pulled over, you know Off the Record's got your back. You don't have to panic. All right, folks, today we have a special treat. Professor Gordon Murray is calling us from his home in England, probably wearing an amazing Hawaiian shirt, because that's what he does. He was one of our favorite guests last year in 2022, and now he is here promoting the new T33 Spider roofless version of his naturally aspirated V12 supercar from Gordon Murray Automotive. He will almost certainly tell us some incredible stories that will blow our minds. Let's thank him for his time and listen up to Gordon Murray on the Smoking Tire Podcast. We are live, sir. Thank you for joining us again.
Pleasure, Matt. Pleasure.
And wow, I haven't seen you. I saw you for like 45 seconds at Pebble Beach at the Quail, where I got to see the T50 and T33 in person. And wow, stunners, those cars. They were just fantastic.
Thank you.
They were, not that I was surprised, but they're quite petite. They're rather small cars, which is in the spirit of what you've done in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all about the driving experience, and the footprint is a big part of it. The footprint and the weight, of course.
Sure. It's something that we talk about a lot. The roads have not gotten any wider. The roads are the same. In our country, they've been the same for the last 50 years. In your country, they've been the same for the last 500 years, I think.
Yeah.
And but you're tall. Are you 6 foot? You're over 6 feet. You're like
I'm 6'4". Yeah.
Yeah. So a tall man in a small car, it's a tough challenge, right?
It is from a packaging point of view, but I obviously always make cars that I can fit in. Even something like the light car company Rocket I did in '93. I had one journalist in that was 6'8".
Oh, that's, yeah. Whoa. That's good. I mean, I think it's important, that the 99th percentile of us drivers can fit in these cars. There is, of course, a correlation between height and wealth, ability to afford Gordon's cars directly. But ergonomically, do you start from the inside out? in order to make yourself fit in those cars?
Yeah, definitely. We don't operate like a normal OEM, like a normal manufacturer. It's all in our design, engineering and development process, where absolutely we turn that on its head. So typically, it's the marketing people and the accountants that decide on the next model of a platform, and then the car is styled, and that's shown to the board and the shareholders and the public as some sort of show, and then the poor engineers have got to try and turn it into something you can use. We don't do that. We do a total parallel design activity. So we do the packaging first before we even think about styling. I've already got the shape of the car I want and the ethos in my head anyway. So I know what that's going to be. I mean, it's handy actually doing the styling and the engineering, because you've only got yourself to argue with.
yeah, for sure. It's not designed by committee. It's designed by Gordon.
So we do
That's why he's on the name of the company.
Yeah.
The package is done first. So we get, and that of course includes ergonomics. It includes all the we do early crash studies for making sure we've got head clearance on all the various crashes and stuff. We even do basic aerodynamics, or what we call block models on CFD, and we make sure the car's manufacturable, and then we start styling.
Oh.
So we completely the other way around.
Well, when you've got a three-seater, right? Because the driver is in the center, you actually get a little more leg room there, right? Because the front wheel wells don't protrude into that space as much. When you've got the driver on the left side, or is the T33 left-hand and right-hand drive, or is it just left-hand drive?
Yeah, both. Yeah.
Both. So then you end up in a situation where you could have a sort of offset pedal box. How do you work around that, or is that just a fact of life?
So a little bit of both again. It's the early cars from the 80s, the supercars were dreadful, and when I rather infamously, before I did the F1, I drove the current batch, which was sort of F40 959 Porsche, the Bugatti EB110, the XJ220 Jag, those sort of things. And the pedal offsets on those and things like Countach were just dreadful. I mean, they really were. And you're absolutely right. That was the wheel arch intrusion. So very, very wide front tires, encroaching on the pedal box. And one of the reasons I chose to do central driving position was to exorcise all the bad stuff. And you can move the driver forward 10 inches, 250 millimeters, relative to a left or right-hand drive motor car.
That's a lot. Yeah, that's a ton. Yeah.
And of course, you get zero pedal offset. So that's why I did that. When we did the 33, it's a massive compromise between how far forward you push the occupants and pedal offset. And because, our number one statement is driving perfection, we don't want a lot of pedal offset. So our occupants aren't that far forward in 33, so we've got the minimum amount of pedal offset.
And does it also help to push the occupants inward closer to each other to sort of cheat that metric a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So the seat couple, and we've got a tougher problem than most people because our cars are quite narrow. So the seat couple distance is what that's called. Is relatively narrow, not quite Porsche 911, but getting on for that.
The most extreme of that I've seen, I got to have a quick ride along in the Aston Valkyrie AMR Pro, in which you already know where I'm going with this. In which Andy Prio, who was an absolute gentleman and is very fast and a very racing driver-sized human. He goes, okay, now what you need to do is grab your left arm and hold it as tightly against yourself as you possibly can. And, okay, I get it. It's not meant for me. But at the same time, I was going, you're selling this to people? What are you doing?
I know. But to be fair to the Valkyrie, it's it's not really designed as a road car. It's designed to go be the quickest car around a track, you know. So
Oh yeah.
the fact that you have to be extremely friendly with your passenger or your driver,
Yeah.
really matter, I suppose.
Well, either they're physically uncomfortable or they're just deeply uncomfortable for a variety of other reasons while going for a ride in that car.
Eventually, you either want them behind you and then not in the car at all.
Yeah. It was a disturbing experience, to say the least, that thing. So this new car, the Spider, it's really pretty. It's got a lot of kind of classic throwback influences from sort of stuff from the 60s, but it still looks new and clean and fresh, and no big wings. Not a lot of visible downforce elements, which I know is a thing of yours, to keep that stuff underneath the car.
Yep.
And I really like the treatment of the C-pillar, roll bar, roof scoop area. That 2 feet of design is fantastic.
Oh, thank you, Matt. I'm not a great fan. 90% of the supercars, or actually even sports car Spyders, do what I call the twin headrest treatment. So you have
the double hump.
Yeah, exactly. Couple of camels, and you have the problem with those.
I used to like it.
Yeah, thanks for ruining that, by the way.
The problem with those is, for me, is two things. One is a visual thing, and that is that because the outside of those bumps is actually your outside A surface, they're always offset to the center of the seat.
Sure.
So if you look at the center of the seat, they're offset, and that really offends me from a styling point of view. And the second one is we wanted to use the deployable spoiler, just like the 33 Coupe, on the back of the car. And if those bumps aren't very clean aerodynamically, they're great vortex generators. And we thought we might have to make that spoiler on the back much, much bigger on the Spider, which I didn't want to do. And our aero targets for the Spider were, our targets were to match the coupe in downforce and almost the same in drag. And we've achieved that with this sort of 1960s throwback aerodynamic rollover bar. If you look at something like one of my favorite cars of all time from a shape point of view, is the 206 SP Dino from 1966.
Or if like a Ferrari 250 LM would be the same kind of vibe.
There you go.
Yeah.
Same thing. And that was done for that reason. So you had a nice aero.
There's the rear 3/4 Zach. Yes, look at that. Well, you talk about a great looking car. They didn't get anything wrong on that one, did they? That's
one of my favorite cars of all time.
Ooh, yeah. It's got like a Stratos wing to it. I like that.
Yeah.
So is it hard for you to, because that car, you correct me if I'm wrong, but that Dino was designed by someone who said, it must look like a woman. You know, it was not designed using what I gather to be scientific principles that are known today, right?
Yeah, something you want to wash, yeah.
Something you want to wash. That's fantastic.
I think a lot of the cars in those days, believe it or not, were designed by engineers, the racing cars from that period. Very seldom did they go to a coach builder with a chassis and go, do me like they did with the road cars, go to Bertolini or Zagato or Pininfarina and go, build me a body on this. A lot of them were actually designed by engineers. And the interesting point there is there's nothing extraneous on those cars. There's none of the slots or the flip ups or nothing is there for styling. It's all for a purpose. And that's something I carry forward on all GMA cars. There's nothing on our motor cars that is there for styling. It's all, of course, shapes are, but there's no slots or holes or inlets or outlets that don't do something. Whereas more and more modern supercars, it drives me insane with, they come out with these stories about what these holes and slats and things are doing, and it's all rubbish.
So is this, to go back to the 60s, was it like tape and string engineering more than computers?
Yeah, and a lot of it was, there were no wind tunnels. A lot of it was just the gut feel from the engineer. And learning from the last year's car. Well, that one had a little too much lift on the front, so what can we do to counteract that? Or stick some dive planes on, or whatever. It was very intuitive design in those days.
So your the T33, something that's other than that C-pillar and rear window section treatment, which is fantastic, that's two things that really stand out to me when looking at the photos. One, the windshield is huge compared to the size of the car. At least it looks that way in photos. It's got quite a rake on it, and it comes back, over quite a bit of the passenger compartment, to the point where the driver, a great portion of the driver's body is actually sitting underneath the windscreen. And then there's no, what you can call, I don't know, surfacing on the sides of the car. They're very, very just smooth, as opposed to a lot of what you might see from, say, the new Porsche GT3 RS, which is like all these bends and scoops to sort of move air around wheel wells and stuff like that. Can you talk about that design a little bit for a second?
Yeah, sure. First, if you take the windscreen first, the first thing is the production car. These show car models, these working models, they take about 10 months to make. So when we released the surface for this, it was a bit of a snapshot in time, if you like. And subsequently, we've done more work on the seating buck and the header rail, which is the back of the windscreen at the top, is uncomfortably close to your head when you're getting in and out. And we decided several months ago that we were going to move that forward more than 4 inches on the production car. That's already done, and actually it improves the look of the car as well, which is a bonus. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the windscreen looks so big, so deep, is because I love low front scuttles. I mean, this has got the same scuttle height at the base of the windscreen as T50, and that is some 4 inches lower than your average supercar.
That's a big difference.
It's huge. When you're sitting, it's a bit like a video game. You can see the road just 1.5 meters in front of the car.
Oh, wow.
About 8 feet in front of the car. And the other thing we do is we make sure that the muscle over the front wheel, the front wing, we call it, the top point of that is absolutely in line with the center line of the front wheel. So when you're sitting in the car, you've got this massively good forward vision, and you can place the front wheel when you're trying to hit an apex, on a narrow country road or something. And that's all done purposely. So the low scuttle is on purpose. And of course, you take 4 inches off the scuttle, you add 4 inches to the windscreen.
I guess now that I look at it a little closer, it's actually not that the windscreen intrudes that much over the driver. It's that it goes very, very far down the front of the car, and the depth of the dashboard is actually further than we are used to, right?
Yeah, so if you imagine that scuttle height is 4 inches higher, the windscreen gets shorter.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look anything like that, In fact, some supercars are 6 inches higher than that.
Sure.
So the windscreen is much shorter, if you like.
Yeah, when you look at, we've got a picture up of a McLaren 720, not a terrible car if you ask me, but when you look at it by comparison, it does look a little frumpy, doesn't it?
You see how high the scuttle is on that, for example.
Yeah.
And the reason why we park the windscreen and wiper in the middle is for the same reason, because most supercars or sports cars have what we call a sawtooth bonnet. That is, the bonnet goes higher than necessary and then drops down, and you park the wiper behind that.
Yeah.
And that stops it lifting aerodynamically when it's parked. If you park it in the middle, you just have the bonnet running straight into the windscreen with no sawtooth, which is cleaner looking, better aerodynamically, and once again gives you that takes 2 inches off the scuttle height.
And you only need one wiper, so you save a pound.
Exactly. So that was all intentional again.
Do you get used to that when you're driving it with the I have never driven a car where the wiper is parked in the center like that. You get used to it?
If you look at every Le Mans car, that's where they park.
Well, they're being paid to drive it. They're not parking it at the grocery store.
Good point.
That's a different thing. And then on the sides of the T33, it's very clean, not a lot of scoops, but a lot of the mid-engine cars that are being built today and the cars that are the highest performing cars, they have a lot of ins and outs on the side, and we've sort of been told that that is the way to do it. Is it because they have the turbochargers and therefore a lot more heat to deal with than your naturally aspirated engine, or is there another reason?
Once again, it's a little bit of both. I think they need more cool air into the car, but they also use that as a styling feature. I like cars that are very clean and well proportioned. What we're trying to do is make something that will still look good in 20 years or 30 years time. So you've got to stick to classic proportions and don't damage the shape too much. What you've got up there is probably one of the better modern cars, if you like.
We've got a Ferrari 296.
296. That's one of the cleaner ones, but some of them are really messy if you look at them. What we've done to disguise the outlet is just behind the front wheel, the body swoops up, which actually is the bottom of the door, and the air from the radiator and the front wheel arch comes out. There actually is an exit duct, but it's in that black.
It's hidden in some black.
Yeah,
and,
so that's right there. That's an exit duct.
It's very sneaky.
That's very
and
cool.
It does work. I mean, I mean, like styling wise, it is very well hidden. I'm not like, actually, believe it or not, Gordon's design does work. Like, yeah, no, it works. But I mean, it works in terms of the fact that it is hidden in the shadow of the rest of the car.
And that, once again, was intentional. And I also wanted that to be, I didn't want another shut line for the bottom of the door. So I raised that side panel so the bottom of that is actually the bottom of the door. So it saves another shut line.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah. Oh, so the scoop stays where it's at as part of the tub, and then the door opens above it.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, well, you can see too many lines where the body panels match, and some cars have just, I mean, for cheap cars for manufacturing have a lot of them, but even some supercars, it breaks up. Otherwise, there's beautiful shape and all this paint.
Oh, we've got here at Westside Collector Car Storage, one of the things we do for our customers is paint protection film, and that's when you really figure out how many seams there are in a body. When they go, by the way, this car is going to be $20,000 to do paint protection film.
15 different pieces.
The 2005 Ford GT is one of the best cars ever made, but it's an egregious body panel offender in terms of the number of pieces to put it together. Folks, we are brought to you by NASCAR. What a great sponsor NASCAR is. And this episode is brought to you by the NASCAR Cup Series, which is headed to its biggest and baddest track, Talladega Super Speedway. I love Talladega. It is my favorite oval course. It's not an oval, it's a tri-oval, but super speedway on the NASCAR calendar. It has the steepest banking in the country. I believe it's 33 degrees of banking. I've driven it. It's like driving on a wall. It is so cool. This track is a monster. 2.5 miles of pure speed, almost 200 miles an hour the whole way around the track, inches away from each other for 500 miles. It's going to be an epic race to watch from the green all the way to the checkered. The playoff spots are dwindling, and you can witness the big one at Talladega. So make sure you grab some friends, find a comfortable spot on the couch, get some queso, and check this race out. Tune into the GEICO 500 from Talladega, Sunday, April 23rd, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific on Fox.
When we were looking at the side luggage, because this car, like 50, has the two sort of saddlebag type luggage compartments with two suitcases each side. And I couldn't do the gull wing opening as I did on 50 because we don't have a central spine on this car. So that was out of the question. And it drove me completely nuts for a couple of months. And then I had a hot shower moment where I suddenly thought, why not just open vertical hinge the side panel and open the whole side of the car? Because if you have another like that, if you have another shut line, it would run right through that lovely muscle line across and break up that muscle line, which would look awful. So instead of doing that, we just open the whole side of the car.
Now, this is a really interesting angle. I looked at this photo before, and it was extremely cool. The rear 3/4 haunches open on a hinge from the rear, and it almost looks like they're opening like a reverse beetle wing. Is that accurate? I think close enough.
That's it.
And inside are the luggage cases. Before you decided to do that, was that empty, vacuous space before, or what occupied that space before?
No, that was intentional from day one. I just put a big red cross through that bit of the car. None of the designers could put anything there because that was always going to be the luggage. The problem with a lot of the Spyders is you take the roof panels out, supercar Spyders, and you stick them in the front luggage compartment, and that's it.
Yeah.
And then you decide whether
that's
you take
a best case scenario, by the way. You're talking about.
Yeah. And then you got to choose between your underpants or your socks.
Right.
And on this, I was determined to have proper luggage beyond stowage of the carbon roof panels, and so we made that successful on the F1 and the T50 with the side panniers. It was just the opening. I just could not think of a way without introducing another shut line, which would have been awful. Until I suddenly thought, why not just open the whole panel?
Is that something that's only possible with a naturally aspirated car? Because a lot of the turbocharged cars today, you have, and we just saw in the 296, like you have an air intake there that goes both to the engine intake and to the cooling system.
Yes, it helps a lot. We introduce air into the engine bay with a knacker duct in the floor. So we don't need, on the 50 and the 33, all the engine bay cooling is from the floor, so we don't need side ducts.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And of course, the engine intake is a direct ram induction, so we don't need holes in the body for that.
Yeah, I bet that sounds good with the roof off. That's probably a delightful experience.
Can you imagine? I mean, if you want an immersive supercar Spider experience, I promise you it's not going to get any better than this, because we drop the rear glass electronically so you can bring the engine sound into the cockpit a bit through that, and then take the roof panels out, drop the side glass, and then on top of that, you've got 11,000 revs just above your right or left ear hole.
You better make sure your toupee glue is tight on that day. That thing's going right in. It's going right into 12 ITBs. I hope there's a screen in there catching birds.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful design. Now, you touched on it briefly, but do the roof panels go into the front bonnet?
Yes. So we've got 115 liters in the front, and the roof panel stow there. After that, there's not a lot of room for much more, to be honest. But you've got the 4 suitcases in the rear.
Who's your luggage partner? Who helps with that luggage? Are you designing your own luggage?
We design it ourselves, and then it gets made through a British luggage company. Yeah.
Is it the same company that did the F1 back in the day?
No, that was an Italian company. Yeah.
Got to keep it on the island, I think. It's important.
Yeah, we're trying.
Well, after Brexit, you have no choice. Sorry. The other thing I wanted to ask, and I do want to make sure we leave plenty of time in the show because I dominated it with my questions last time you were on, and we have so many questions from our audience that I do want to make sure that they get a say in this, and it's not just what Matt wants to talk about show on this one. But one of the things that I saw a little Instagram video of your final sign-off on the production T50, I believe it was. So it was just you driving through a tunnel with a little satisfied smirk, and I thought it was a very satisfying clip of a video. But that's not my question. My question is, what was the very last thing on that car? What was the last thing that just needed finishing before customer sign-off?
It's a really boring answer, I'm afraid.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's software.
Okay.
The software just goes on and on and on. You know, I can remember throwing all my toys out the pram with the McLaren F1 when I discovered it had to have 2 electric boxes. It had an ECU engine controller, and a chassis controller box. And I went completely bananas, made them stop and start again and put everything in one electronic box. This car's got 55.
Whoa. Times have changed.
But each one is probably much smaller and lighter. They all collectively probably weigh the same or less as the one, right?
They are, certainly. Yeah. I mean, the McLaren F1 looked like a large biscuit tin.
Yeah. Yeah, I have one of those in my Countach, and we threw it out too.
We had an extra one. Yeah.
Yeah, we were taking apart my Countach, Gordon, and we found an extra ECU there during restoration. It was a surprise. It had a USB port in it, so we were pretty sure it wasn't OEM.
It was an aftermarket. Yeah, it was an aftermarket electronic controller of some kind.
Stupid. With the top down, I mean, obviously it makes sense to do a Spider version of the T33. Driving supercars with a top down is fantastic. No, you're not going to convince me otherwise. But what are some of the other challenges besides roof packaging and the aerodynamics around the cabin that come from turning this car into a Spider? I imagine it was designed to be both from the ground up. So
yeah, sure. I mean, to be honest, I haven't really been a Spider person. I've got a few Spider classics because they either only came as a Spider or I prefer the design of the car. I didn't really buy them for the wind and the hair experience, if you like. But one of the main reasons I'm not a fan of a Spider is because the torsional rigidity is usually way below. People design a coupe, and then they decide to take the roof off. And then they, at the last minute, chuck a lot more metal at the rocker sections under the doors. And you end up with a heavily compromised car. Now, if you take out number one of our 7 target statements, is driving perfection. And if we were going to do an open car, I could not compromise the transient handling, the vehicle dynamics in any way, shape or form. So you're right, from day one, we decided that our minimum torsional target for the car would be for the Spider. And then the coupe would be a bonus if it was stiffer. So that's what we did. And I know this has got just the right amount of torsional stiffness or the minimum torsional stiffness, so we will not affect the transient handling. So you can actually jump from the coupe into the Spider and not feel any difference in the handling. So now I know I've got a supercar Spider with no compromises. I'm actually going to have one of these, I think.
Well, is it you're absolutely right in terms of the lack of torsional rigidity in most open top cars, but in the current generation of, I think, certainly the carbon tub cars, they've really minimized that to the point where if you're not you or Dario or, someone who's on the front row at Le Mans, you're not really going to feel the difference much other than maybe the weight of the roof mechanism.
No, you're absolutely right. But still, to show how much closer we are, you can judge that by the difference in weight between a coupe and a Spider.
Oh, what is the difference in weight?
50, 60, 100 kilos I've seen in some cases. And that can tell you instantly that they didn't start with a Spider and they've had to add a lot of material. We've only got an 18 kilo difference between the coupe and the Spider. And of course, some of that's the roof mechanism and the roof stove.
That's so very small.
The difference in the chassis is only about 10 kilos.
That's amazing. And the roof panels are carbon like the rest of the car, I imagine, right?
Sure, yeah.
Are they painted like the car, or are they naked carbon?
You can have whatever you like in this. The car's very like 50, the car's extremely handmade. It takes 6 weeks to put one together. So you could have them carbon, body color, black. We've even got 2 types of carbon on this. So it's specking the car's going to be. I've had so much fun specking the T50s. I've been in every single spec sessions. I've met everybody. And
that must be a treat for your customers. I bet they don't even for millions of dollars. I bet they would be surprised to find out that you're sitting in on their color choices.
Is that a line item?
How many people have you told no to when they go, all right, here's what I want to do, and you go, listen, not with my name on it, buddy.
We did joke in the spec sessions, in the early spec sessions, we did start a bit of a joke about if you get an unmarked line on your final invoice of £25,000, that's base tax.
Taste test.
Yeah, I've had a couple discussions with people who build very, very expensive supercars, and they have told me about some specs that they're like, please don't tell anybody that this car exists. It's going to, deep into China. It'll probably never be seen again, but I had to do some things I really didn't want to do on this car.
But you know what? Honestly, Matt, the surprise for us with 50 and with 33 now is we seem to attract a completely different type of buyer from the normal supercar collector. And therefore, the specs on trim and color have been incredibly sort of restrained is the wrong word, but very in keeping with the technical side of the motor car and very tasteful. We reckon that out of the 100 T50s, a minimum of 85 of them are going to be driven and driven a lot. So thank goodness we seem to be attracting the right sort of buyer, for our cars, basically.
I wanted to ask something. I don't know if you can actually comment on this, but I watched another video. I think you were with Harry or Johnny Smith, Harry Metcalf or Johnny Smith, and you said that the percentage of people that have already bought a T33 coupe have bought a Spider as well. I think it was like 40% or maybe higher. And my question is, I understand why those buyers are like, I want to have both because like this thing's amazing.
And money doesn't matter.
But is there any part of you that wishes these cars were able to be experienced by a larger number of people to kind of spread this gospel of driving perfection?
I think the numbers you're talking about are people that have bought 50, that have bought 33 coupe.
Oh, okay.
It's not anything near that between the coupe and the Spider, because that doesn't make sense, really. The people that have bought, about a third of 50 owners bought a 33 coupe. And I think that makes sense because they are such different motor cars. They are very, very... The T50, as we promised, is our halo car, and we know we're going to do another one of those. It's the next F1. It's absolutely on the limit. Everything, the weight, the engine at 12,400, everything is absolutely on the ragged edge with T50, whereas 33 was meant to be something that you could, if you only ever own one supercar, from the point of view of practicality, good looking, best engine, blah, 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 that's what you could buy. So I can see the crossover between those two, but we haven't got anywhere near that crossover between the coupe and the Spider.
Okay, my mistake.
That makes sense. Mm-hmm. The extreme and then the usable.
Right, you can get a little taste of the 50 every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The three-seater is great when you're sitting in there, but you're not trying to climb in and out of that thing 5 times a day to run errands.
Yeah.
That's a real hey, watch me now piece,
That's true.
So when you say the color and spec choices are in keeping with the car's sort of ethos, does that mean we're talking about sort of classic color combinations that you might find in a sports car from the 60s and not a more garish choice that sort of watch this craziness I can do now?
Exactly that. Not a lot of bright colors, a lot of very technical colors, which complement the car. What we did for people with 50, because we've got 6,000 standard colors,
6,000 standard colors.
And then we can paint a sample on top of that, and we can mix.
Who does 6,000 not cover? What colors are left?
So
how do you come up with 6,000 standard colors? I'm sorry, but
if a mantis shrimp shows up, because they can see more colors than we can.
Yeah. We didn't. That's the paint company. They have 6,000 standard colors.
Oh, okay.
We've painted very few cars with a standard color, funny enough. But what we did was we mixed our own. So we curated, a couple of months before people came in for the first spec sessions, we curated a nice little book. And to working with the color and trim people in the studio, color and person, I beg your pardon, I don't want to sound too posh, we only got one, and myself and my creative director, we picked 22 colors we thought suited the car, and then 22 complementary interior layouts and colors that were good with that color. And then we sent that out to everybody. So when they came in, at least most people had a starting point. Not that they picked one and went, I want that. They just went, I'm going to start here, and then we work it up from there, you know. And it worked perfectly.
That's fun. Did you ever see it was just reshared recently on social media? There was a guide that Mercedes made in the 90s that showed exterior colors and interior colors, and it checked boxes where A complemented B very well, and there was like big red X's where it was like, don't choose these two.
Like a color guide.
It was very funny, like how to avoid garish trash in your new S-Class.
Yeah.
It was really funny. Porsche obviously never repeated that experiment.
No, I've had so much fun meeting everybody, and you know, as I say, we just seem to attract a different sort of owner with NGMA, which is brilliant.
Do you think, is it people that were teenagers when the F1 was doing its thing and now want to be a part of that legacy?
Matt, if I could have, you know, if I could have had a recording of exactly what you said, so many owners, because we've got, I think, nearly half our owners of T50 are under 45.
Oh, that's cool.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
and
cool.
Which is brilliant, which is absolutely brilliant. And those people, almost to a person, said, teenager, F1 poster on the wall, started a business, got successful. By that time, F1s were $15 million, couldn't afford one. This is my F1. And my reply to them is, you've got a better car that'll be easier to run for an 85% discount.
That's what I would say if I was buying one.
Yeah,
the exact statement. Of
sure.
course. Yeah.
And there's a lot of little details in this car that can, like that whole entire center section where the shifter sits and those knobs. I mean, if you look at a photo of the F1's console, it's not exactly the same, but you could tell the same company made both of those things. I love that there's like no screens. Philosophy, excuse me.
This is so good.
That looks like it could have been, you know, the same kind of thing from '95, which is, I say that in a good way.
Yep.
It's excellent.
No, I've managed to get with 50 and 33. I've managed to get another one of my pet hates. So I got rid of touch screens on both of them, but I've also got rid of column stalks, which I find so exasperating on cars, because you jump in another car and they do different things, you know, or the haptics are wrong or soggy, or you have to let go of the steering wheel to reach behind the wheel for a column stalk. So I've got rid of those altogether on this.
It's interesting that you are so anti-column stalks. I understand being anti-touchscreens and being anti-haptic, because those are all just terrible. But we're looking at the photograph of the steering wheel, and I don't particularly find column stalks when they're done simply. Like McLaren does a very good job, I think, with their blinkers and wiper stalks. But your steering wheel is very simple. There's a left blinker and a right blinker and what looks like two either toggle switches or scrolly wheels.
Yep. That's it.
Interesting, though, that you have chosen a 4-spoke steering wheel as opposed to a 3-spoke steering wheel. How did that come about?
That came about purely with design, because I don't like wheels that aren't round, and I don't like wheels with a very thick grip. So our grip is very, very small, more like a classic car. I don't like my Alpine A110. The steering wheel is so fat. I've got big hands, and I can hardly get my hands around it. So the only reason why we went for a flat bottom, it just helps you get in and out of the car a little bit. It just makes it a little bit more easy. But with a 3-spoke wheel, what offends me, and it did on the 50 to start with, is that the spoke doesn't land anywhere near, from a structural point of view, the change in direction from round to flat. And I've always thought a 4-spoke wheel where you stiffen the wheel at the change of direction would make much more sense. So we've been able to make this wheel about 200 grams lighter.
Oh, really? Even with the extra spoke? How about that?
Yeah, but I think the F1 wheel is 850 grams, and I think this is about 700 or something.
Oh, wow. Even with the electronics and stuff in it, which the F1 wheel, of course, does not have.
Yep.
How interesting. What is the diameter of that wheel, if you know offhand, which I'm sure you do?
Good question. I think it's 3... Oh, it's such a long time ago. I think
Stumped him.
We got him.
350, maybe.
350 is good. That's a good number. I like that.
It's not a terribly small wheel.
Well, that's okay as long as it fits the rest of the cockpit. It's fine.
Well, we couldn't go too small because the T50's got manual steering.
Oh, right. Yeah, and the steering wheel is shared between the two cars, right?
No, it's a completely new wheel.
Oh, is it? Sorry, I don't have pictures of both up at the same time. My bad.
Will in a minute.
It's amazing, and I love that you have thought about every little thing. It's just perfect for you. Oh, there's the T50 wheel. Oh yeah, right. Yeah, okay. Actually, interestingly enough, I think the T33 wheel looks better. It does.
Well, there you go. I'll give you the reason.
You have now, yeah. You're evolving, sir. Let's give some airtime to our fans of the show. Of course, if you want to watch the live stream, ask questions of our guests or us, and of course get an ad-free listening experience, the Patreon is where you do it. Patreon.com/thesmokingtirepodcast. And let's get right into it. Chris Navio says, Gordon, did you ever consider using carbon fiber wheels to reduce unsprung mass?
Yeah, for a microsecond. The problem with carbon wheels is quite simply safety. We looked at them when we were racing, funnily enough, and we never went there because the failure mode for carbon fiber is catastrophic.
Failure mode.
That is a very British way of saying when they go, they explode.
What mode is it in? Failure mode.
Which and of course, a metallic wheel, the failure mode is propagation. So if you, for example, if you nick a curb with a metallic wheel, and give it a small crack, it'll take a long time for that crack to propagate through fatigue, and you can usually spot it really early. The problem with carbon fiber is if you nick a curb on that, or if somebody gets a bit monkeyish with a tire lever when they're putting a new tire on and gouge out the first two plies of the carbon, there is no propagation, it just explodes.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's not great.
And with forged wheels these days, I mean, the forged wheels are beautiful these days. We can get down to within a kilo of 2 pounds of a carbon wheel. I think our front wheels are less than 7 kilos on a T50.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Are they 18-inch or 19-inch? What size are they?
They're 19-inch.
That is really light for a 19-inch wheel. That's amazing. Very, very cool. I like this one. Ted Theo Logan says, I'm curious what Gordon thinks of the design of the C8 Corvette. Have you seen the current Corvette much in person?
Oh, is that the rear engine one?
The mid-engine car. It is selling very well here in America. They're all over the place, and they are quite nice to drive as well. Yeah,
I've always been a great fan of Corvettes. I think the value for money for a sports car experience, and I'm not just talking about bang for buck, I'm talking about the fact that they've got really interesting aluminium chassis. It's not just some, production chassis that you put a sexy body on. They're designed right from scratch, and they've got some really interesting materials and technology in them. And going right back to the early mid-50s Corvettes, it was a huge toss-up. When I was a lot younger, I loved the 55, 56, 57 T-Bird and the the mid to late 50s Corvettes up to about 61. Mm-hmm. I love those cars. And it was a real toss-up which one I bought, and the T-Bird won in the end. And I've still got the 57 T-Bird.
Do you?
But, yeah.
Is it a cruiser spec car, or is it a high-performance?
No. Well, you wouldn't want high performance because it takes 4 miles to stop.
Those first generation Thunderbirds are very, very pretty, and they're much smaller in person than they photograph.
You know what? It's shorter, narrower, and lighter than a 3 Series BMW.
Yeah. And they came, if you ever saw, I don't know if they made it over to the UK, but you could have gotten them with a factory supercharger back in the day.
Oh, yeah, that's
Paxton
right. Yeah.
supercharged version.
Mine's a normal one, but without the Continental kit on the back. I drive it to Goodwood sometimes for fun.
That's probably a novelty for them. I bet. They probably don't see a lot of T-Birds over there, except for the couple like crazy race car ones that are going for the members meeting. Let's see. Christian says, Gordon, what is your favorite slow car to drive fast? And are there any sports cars at the affordable end of the spectrum that you really enjoy?
The favorite slow car to drive fast is easy. It's one of my classic car collections. I've got an original 1959 Austin Healey Frog Eye Spider. I think you call them bug eyes, right?
We do call them bug eyes on this side, yeah.
Yeah. So, and unlike most people, I haven't put the 1275 motor in it. I haven't put disc brakes on the front. I haven't done all the mods. It's absolutely bog standard, and it's the 950 43 horsepower engine. I lusted after one when I was 17 years old, and I finally got to buy one about 20 years ago. And I drive it to work, and it just oversteers everywhere. You just don't need the steering wheel once you've got the backsliding. And it's the most fun. It sounds lovely. It's got a very rifle bolt gear change. And because I wanted one when I was younger, every time I'm in it, I force myself to look down the bonnet, look at the dashboard, and all the things I lusted after when I was a teenager.
There it is. We've got a little photo of it. Yeah.
Yeah, leaf green. There you go.
That's a good green, actually. You do it. Are you going to do a T33 in that green? That would actually, I think, be very complimentary to that design. It'd be very cool.
Yeah. Modern cars, I suppose I have to say my everyday car, which is an Alpine A110, which is not incredibly quick. It's only 240 horsepower, I think, but it's 1,100 kilos. And it's got sublime ride and handling compromise. It's really fantastic. In fact, we benchmarked it for T50.
Oh, cool. Wow. That's interesting. That sort of parallels the NSX and the McLaren F1 relationship a little bit.
You just made Mr. Twig very, very happy, I think. I'm sure you guys are friends, but the guy that led that team probably is very happy right now.
Do you own, or are you at all interested in luxury cars, or do you have a Range Rover in the collection somewhere or anything like that, or is it all lightweight sports cars?
I've got, of the collection, 38 of them are under 900 kilos.
I remember you said that, which is an amazing. If you've got a theme for a collection, I think you'd be hard pressed to beat that.
And I still, in my life, have never owned a 4-door car because I'm not really old enough for that yet. I'll get one when I grow up.
You've never owned a 4-door car?
Nope.
Well, at this point, you can't. You have to ride that one out, man. You have to make that a lifetime commitment. I'll put that on your tombstone. Never owned a 4-door car. That's amazing.
This casket only has 2 doors.
Yeah, I put 2 doors on the casket. That's a boss move. You've owned more cars with 3 seats than with 4 doors. That's with cars with an odd number of seats would be another exceptional theme for a collection. Either collection, 1 or probably 3 only. Mr. Nailhead says, what is the scariest race car ever in your opinion?
That I've driven, do you think? Or
you could give us 2 answers. One that you've driven and one that you've witnessed being driven, maybe.
There was some, it's really awkward to name names, but in the 70s, there were several newcomers into the Formula One scene who obviously looked at it and thought anybody, the DFE, the ubiquitous DFE engine, you can just go and buy one off the shelf, you buy a Hewlett gearbox, anybody can design a Formula One car. And my goodness, there were some terrible cars out there. I've spoken to drivers who have driven them, and they were literally terrifying. I've luckily not driven. I've only driven my own Formula One cars. I drove every single Formula One car until I made them too small for me to fit in 1979. But I've seen plenty of Formula One cars out there that were absolutely dreadful. From a sports car point of view, if you talk, I haven't driven one, but if you talk to drivers at Goodwood, the Lotus 30, Colin Chapman, tried to do a backbone chassis in a very powerful V8 powered car, a bit like Di Tommaso. He did the beautiful little Vallelunga. I've got one, which was the first mid-rear engine backbone chassis car. And then he did the Mangusta and put a V8 in it. And it completely, I mean, the chassis was just not up to it.
Everyone I know who's driven a Mangusta is like, looks great, don't get anywhere near it. Just park it and look at it.
There you go. So Colin Chapman, my hero, decided to do a V8 powered sports car with a backbone chassis, and all the drivers say it had a mind of its own. And then he did a Lotus 40, which was the same concept. And when you speak to the guys that have driven that, you say, well, you know, what's a Lotus 40 like? They say it's a Lotus 30 with 10 more mistakes.
Did you have a lot of good moments with Colin Chapman personally?
I did when I got accepted into the fold. For the first 2.5 years, I didn't get even an eye long sort of glance in the pit lane when I went past, because I was 23-year-old new kid on the block in Formula One. But then we finished the season in '74 at Watkins Glen, and we were first and second on the grid with the Brabham BD44, and first and second in the race, and fastest and second fastest lap. And Chapman came straight up to me after the race, shook my hand, and he said, "That's the way to do it." And that night offered me a job.
Oh, wow. Well, that's a surreal day at the office. That's crazy.
Was there a moment or a series of them, I guess, that led to him trusting you and respecting you that way, or was he just like caught up in the celebration and, you know, was just in a great mood?
No, I think he'd looked at the car, because the 44 was quite a radical motor car. You know, it was the first car to have rising rate suspension. It was a triangular monocoque. Aerodynamically, it was very different. It had crew ground effect. It had first car with a dry sump gearbox. It was the first car to attach the rear suspension directly to the motor. Had a lot of firsts.
And it's a very cool looking car. It's a very unique design. We've got a photo of it up right now, and it's a really funky, different kind of looking car.
It's so much smaller than F1 cars today. And, and you can almost see the driver's waist. Like, you can see where their waist would bend so their legs go out in front of them. And today, you barely can see the top of their helmet.
Yeah.
Looks like Niki Lauda's Ferrari, too.
We were at the Long Beach Grand Prix this past weekend, Gordon, and there was a vintage F1 race right before the IndyCar race. And listening to those cars in the streets of Long Beach was pretty epic. They make quite the noise. Our friend Patrick Long won, which is great. Very talented racing driver. Let's see. What do we have here? Okay. Oh, this is a good one. Sarang Singh said, Niki Lauda wrote about the old Rio track as one of the hardest to drive and set a car up for in the ground effect era due to the centrifugal force acting on the car. In your time as a designer and a trackside, are there any specific tracks that you felt were very hard to set up a car for? That's interesting.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, it's... because, of course, in the old days, 70s and even early 80s, pre-telemetry, you had to literally kneel down next to the driver and later on plug in or just shout and get the feedback from the driver. And then I was the one that directed the mechanics on the car to, you know, change the springs the right height or whatever to go faster. And when I started in Formula One, I looked at the most difficult tracks to win on, and they are invariably the tracks that are very difficult to set up for. And there was Monaco, because Monaco's ridiculous. It's got so many hairpin bends where all you want is mechanical grip and no downforce at all.
Right.
And then you've got the curve through the tunnel and that flat out chicane in those days where you need all the downforce. So you don't know whether to set the car up soft and mechanical for grip or to be stable through the tunnel. So that was a nightmare. The other one was Nürburgring, the proper Nürburgring, the old one, the Nordschleife.
Yeah.
And that one, it had 3 places where the car took off and flew for over 150 feet through the air.
There's some really iconic photographs from that from those races. Yeah.
And the problem with that is, if you and those 3 places were flat, so if the car stayed stable in the air, you didn't have to lift before you took off. And we found that if you compromised the car on the setup so that you could go flat through that, and you then compromised the damper settings for the rest and the aero settings for the rest of the lap, it was still quicker to do that. So we used to reverse the damper settings so the car didn't spring up in the air. So we used to run much more bump settings and less rebound on the damper. And we used to set the car up on the wings so it would stay flat in the air and not start tipping up or tipping down. And that was quicker. So that was another one. And then there was Spa, which is just the most amazing, the Spa-Francorchamps circuit, just the most amazing, fast and slow setup, and to get the car stable and flat through Eau Rouge in those days. And then the last one, funny enough, was Interlagos, which was unbelievably difficult because it was one of the bumpiest circuits on the planet. And when you had a lot of downforce, particularly under the car, it was very difficult to get the car on a stable enough platform without going too stiff. And then it had the world's longest high-speed corner. It had Curva de Sol. This is the original Interlagos, not the Mickey Mouse one they got now. And it was a proper racetrack, and it was so difficult to set up for the Curva de Sol and to keep the high-speed downforce consistent and the bumps and the slower stuff. And when I started as a kid, I thought, to be a proper designer, you've got to win Monaco, Spa, Interlagos, and Francorchamps. And
with the same car, or just across a career?
No,
across career.
Just win them. And I finally did get to win them all.
That's like it's like a good personal what we'd call a triple crown here. It's like a horse racing term in the States. Yeah. But yeah, that's cool. That's a great bit of insight. With Monaco, now when we watch Monaco, I've been to that race in person, and it's quite an interesting scene. And if you're a Formula One fan, it is worth it to find the time and the money to go just to see it. But the race itself, it's very tough to pass. A lot of the passing happens in the pits. Is that, as the cars have gotten bigger and physically taken up more of the track, is that different than what it was like in the 70s, where the cars were a little smaller, or has it always been that way?
No, it's everything. Overtaking everywhere has got more difficult because of the footprint of the car, for sure.
Yeah.
But also the amount of downforce. So the braking point is much nearer the entrance to the corner. So there's less opportunity to overtake. That's true everywhere, not just Monaco. But the footprint is probably more of a deciding factor on the overtaking than anywhere else, because Monaco, they've never been able to widen the circuit.
Right.
So it's rarely narrow. If you get 2 modern Formula One cars, next to each other, that's the whole width of the track. You can't get a fag packet, between the 2 of them.
No parallels to road cars there at all. None that I can see.
No.
Brendan says, is there anything you wish you could incorporate into the T50 but were unable to through packaging, emissions controls, price restrictions, etc.? Any wish list items that just couldn't get into the car?
No.
Well, that's good. That's why they're sold out. Let's see. Kevin McCann says, can you say who will get the first T50 off the production line?
I wish I could, but we can't really talk about owners, unfortunately. But,
I understand.
It's somewhere pretty close to where you guys are.
Oh, good. Hopefully we'll see it.
One of them is in this room.
It's me, you guys. I have something to tell you. I've been saving my pennies. I hope there are at least a couple of them coming to Los Angeles, so I have a chance of seeing them around.
Yeah, there's quite a few on the West Coast, I think. Yeah.
I was up at Bruce Canepa's recently, and he showed me one of your engines on a stand at his shop, and I imagine at least a couple of them will pass through old Bruce's place, probably with 100% markup.
Yeah, no, the engine's a work of art, isn't it? It's a really lovely thing.
It sounds great on video. I can't wait to hear it in person. Do we have? Let's see if we had a bunch other that were very wordy, and I don't want to. Okay, hang on. Is there? Okay, a couple people ask variations, and we touched on this last time you joined us, but we'll just go through it again. People want to see your brain on a slightly less expensive product. They're looking for a Gordon Murray product that's $100,000 or something that regular people might one day dream of affording. And you touched on it last time we spoke, but any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, we got that close. Everybody did. We got very, very close to having it. We worked with Yamaha for several years. And they decided they wanted to go four wheels, and they decided they wanted to use iStream, which is our lightweight manufacturing with composite panels, lightweight manufacturing system. And we did a two-seater electric city car for them, the T26, which was a lovely little thing to drive. We were a bit ahead of its time, perhaps, and then we did the one everybody here was interested in was T40, which was a two-seater sports car, about the same size as a Lotus Elise, just a little bit longer than a Lotus Elise, 840 kilos. It had a 1-liter 3-cylinder Ford EcoBoost engine, 125 horsepower. It had masses of luggage space, air conditioning, and lots of a really nice driver-focused cockpit. And that was probably 8 or 9 years ago. And that could have sold, the base model would sell for £27,000.
Oh, that would have been awesome.
And the souped-up one, the G&D version, with a more powerful engine, was about £33,000. And that was, a Lotus Elise on steroids. It was fantastic, but everyday usable. It had proper upholstery, aircon, proper heater that worked and everything, and a lot of luggage space. And we built several prototypes, and they had a president change or top-end management change, and he suddenly went, "We're not doing four wheels," and that was it.
Incredibly unfortunate. Did you sneak away a prototype for yourself to play with?
I would love to. They took them all back to Japan, but
that's so unfortunate.
I did say to Yamaha, we were only about, I think, 80 people in those days, and I said, if you give us a good lease deal on these, there'll be 40 of them outside of the car park.
Yeah. No, that would have been cool. And Yamaha, they do some cool stuff with engines. I mean, even in otherwise mundane cars. Did you guys in the UK? Did you ever get the Taurus SHO? Do you know what that is?
No.
It was a Ford Taurus, otherwise fairly mundane car, with a sporty suspension and a Yamaha 6-cylinder engine with a beautiful intake runner set up and a manual gearbox. And it actually made a really nice sound, and they drove really good. And they're sort of cult classics over here. Very hard to find one that's not completely beat to crap. Show Gordon the intake runner, and this is in a an otherwise very mundane car, and look how pretty this intake is in a Ford Taurus.
Well, they've done some lovely motors. They did the original Toyota 2000 GT, which are now very collectible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a Yamaha motor. The Lexus LFA V10. That's a Yamaha motor. And the V8,
the best.
The V8 and the Volvo is also a Yamaha motor as well.
Yes, it is. And actually has an intake runner set up, kind of like that Taurus SHO if you take the plastic thing off. Yeah. Yeah. There's that great meme that's like, guy walks into a piano store. And he's like, I need a piano. And Yamaha's like, yes. He's like, strangely enough, I also need a motorcycle. The guy's like, you're not going to believe this.
And I also need a V10 engine for my supercar. Great.
And an outboard motor for my boat. Yeah.
They were, my father has a boat, a 26-foot or 28-foot Boston Whaler that had 2 of those Yamaha engines in them, and that Yamaha 4-stroke offshore engine was a total game changer in the boating world. Amazing engines.
I've got an amphibious boat at our house in Scotland.
I'm sorry. Amphibious?
Amphibious boat, yeah, and it's got a Yamaha 150 Yamaha on the back, and it's just fantastic.
When you say amphibious, you mean
amphibious?
No, amphibious means land and sea, right? You can drive on land somehow?
Yeah, I built a new house. I design houses as well, by the way. I built a new house up in Scotland, makes all its own energy on a beach. And I've got I don't know whether you call it a boathouse or a garage, but I built a thing right on the beach because we've got 20-foot tides there. And you just drive, it's got an electric door, and I load everybody, it takes 9 people, load everybody in the boat, and you just drive out into the sea and then pull the wheels up and off you go.
It's
called sea legs.
Sea legs?
Sea legs.
That's actually a great name. I love when things have just great names like that. Oh, look at that. It's like, oh, wow, how cool. It's got like ATV wheels on it.
There you go.
Oh, wow, that's rad.
Holy moly.
I actually went to Scotland last year on a vacation and had the best time. It was so beautiful, and the people were so nice.
I love it up there.
We were in Braemar. It was fantastic. Good roads, too, for a Gordon Murray T33, if you happen to have one of those. Oh, the sea legs thing, that's pretty cool.
I wanted to go back to the cheap sports car thing. I imagine that today that would put you in the hard situation where you have to remain a small manufacturer for all the new emissions regulations, right?
We could never do that. We're just not set up to, our cars take 6 weeks to put together, but what we did was design it, develop it, and engineer it for Yamaha, and they would have manufactured. They were going to manufacture it in Europe.
So maybe that
would have been cool. That, and you take out that EcoBoost motor and put in a Yamaha like leader bike engine, revs to 12 or something. It'd be insane. Last one, I think. Do you have to get going? We have an hour. Are you on the next thing?
I'm fine, Matt.
Well, I'm taking. Guess what? You're stuck here all day now. Our Bobby says chefs often have a guilty pleasure fast food, something they know they shouldn't like because of how skilled and refined their palate is, but they do anyway. Is there a car that does it for you? Outside your purity of vision and taste, something you shouldn't like, but you like anyway? Good question.
I suppose if you just look at the stats on paper, you've got to say it's the T-Bird because it's like none of my other collection. But that doesn't really count because I absolutely love the design. A car probably that fits that bill, that people are very surprised when they know I've got one, and I had 3 at once at one time, is a Renault Kangoo. The original Renault Kangoo, not the current big thing that's full of leather and loudspeakers and all that rubbish. It was original. It was like a van car, and
yeah, it's like a little micro van.
Absolutely brilliant. And I've got one in France, which is still there. I've got a 4x4 one in Scotland, which I used to go and get fuel for the boat. That's still there. And I had until recently. That's it. Until recently, I had one in England. So I had 3 of them at one stage. And it's a funny little diesel thing, but it's just the most magic car. It swallows anything. It's 4 meters long, and it's got 2,600 liters of space.
That's pretty cool. That's like what they were using in, there's a documentary called The Truffle Hunters. These guys and their dogs and go, it's actually a very sad documentary, but they go out in the woods with their dogs, and this is what they all drove, something like that. Yeah. Well, I'm glad it's like you didn't say Hummer.
Hellcat Charger.
Imagine if next time you come to America, I would give anything to have you review the new electric Hummer, which weighs over 9,000 pounds and has 1,000 horsepower and can't really stop very well.
That would be a really fun experience. Yeah.
I'd have to wear a disguise, I think.
I think you could.
Hey, it's Hollywood. We can find someone who does that makeup.
Yeah, we can make that happen for sure. And last one, Prashawn, this is a great one. What do you think, and no pressure here, is the greatest piece of industrial design for an everyday object? For an example, Prashawn thinks it's the KitchenAid stand mixer, which I love my KitchenAid stand mixer. That is an excellent piece of industrial design.
Oh, that's a good one. Wow. Let me think. When's the last time I went over something?
Anything in your home or your kitchen or your bathroom where you're like, wow, this is a well-made thing.
Could be a pen, desk.
Yeah, it does happen. Industrial design, you're talking about sort of domestic stuff.
I suppose, but if something else comes to mind that's commercial grade.
I'm an absolute sucker, and by the way, a bit of an anorak on jukeboxes.
Yeah, there's one behind you in the shot here.
Oh yeah, of course there is. Yeah, and I've got 17 of them.
They work,
which my wife thinks is 16 too many. But they all work. But it's more than that. I know who designed them, the mechanism. Whenever I get a new one, I run it for a month back to front with the back off because they're full of all sorts of cool Geneva mechanisms and cams and stuff. And then you got the design at the front, and of course it's just such a lovely thing, you know. Paul Fuller was the fundi, so I know who designed them, how many they made, what they're worth. I'm a complete anorak on jukeboxes, and whenever I see a jukebox anywhere, if it's one of the ones I like, because some of them are not so good from a design point of view, I just get completely carried away.
Will you only play a certain type of music out of the jukebox, or can you swap records that are maybe more modern and not of the period of the jukebox?
I have a rule. If it's an original restored jukebox and it's still got the original valve amplifier or tube amp, I think you guys call them, in it, then that has to have period records in it. If it's a restored casing with a modern mech in it, then I can play something more modern. But otherwise, it has to be from the period.
Do you have like Google alerts set up for when they come up for sale, so that it notifies you?
No, I've got I've bought all my favorites now. There was 17 I liked, and I got them.
So okay, so that's an interesting thing. You are able to collect something to a degree that many people would consider excessive, but you also know when to stop.
Yeah, it's like the classic cars. I've got to the end. Apart from one more Abarth, I've got to the end of my list.
That's so interesting. Knowing, I mean, that ethos translates to the cars as well. You know when to stop, even if the car is, you know, by all accounts, a pretty excessive thing.
Are they still making and designing new jukeboxes? Because maybe this is a thing where the supply is finite.
No, not really. They're now designing CD versions of the old ones, which I don't find terribly exciting, to be honest.
Yeah, I understand that.
But you made a very good point there. I think a lot of styling studios, because styling studios, unlike us, we're a handful of people, have hundreds of people in them, and several layers of management reviewing the designs. And I think a lot of the modern cars are fussy because of exactly what you said. They don't know when to stop.
Yeah. Very interesting. I like the idea of like, you've gone down the list and now it's still a collection, it's still a lot, but no more. We're done.
Yep.
That's brilliant. I like that.
That's an example of intent versus if you keep getting lured by the new thing, and like what just came out, and like, oh, maybe want to taste that a little bit and own that a little bit, versus like, no, these are the things I like. I've assessed the entire automotive world. That's it.
Good design's timeless. You know, it doesn't matter if it's a kitchen implement like the mixer. It's timeless. And the cars we're trying to. I know it sounds a bit weird, but we're trying at every junction to be different from other supercar OEMs. The way we treat customers, the way we design the cars, the way we approach performance figures, and the design is a big part of that. The styling is a big part of that. You know, we're trying to do cars that people want to keep in the family and don't swap for the next latest thing, and would still look quite good in 20 or 30 years' time, hopefully.
What kind of missed opportunity do you think the other supercar makers are leaving on the table by not making manual transmissions right now?
I just think they read the market incorrectly. And I think the other thing is volume. You know, if it's very easy for us because we're only making 100 cars. And I think we talked about it last time with the T33. I have to put my hand up. It was me that decided we should potentially offer a pedal shift. I should have read the first line of our 7 sort of things that we aim to hit: driving perfection and driver involvement. And embarrassingly, nobody wanted one. And I think with 100 cars, you can get away with that. If you're trying to sell 4,000 or 5,000 cars a year, I think you know it's paddle shift. Sure.
Did you see? You know, I'm sure you were busy at the Quail doing interviews and all that stuff. And did you see Christian von Koenigsegg's new synthetic manual gearbox in that car? It's pretty. I mean, it's pretty innovative. You got to admit, it's pretty cool.
If you put aside the fact that it isn't really a manual gearbox, of course, but it's technically brilliant.
Yeah,
it's absolutely. When you see the amount of, I said to him, you know, I did a Top Gear thing with him recently, and I said to him, my God, the amount of development work and software development to make that work properly and feel like a manual must be horrendous. Of course, it isn't a manual gearbox, but it doesn't matter. It's very clever what he's done.
In order to, when I saw him right before I saw you in August, he goes, "You got to see this thing I'm doing," and he showed me, and I was like, "Well, you're completely out of your mind." And he goes, "No, but watch this." And he started the car, he put it into manual mode, put it in first gear on the stand, mind you. You know, the car's parked on the stand, and then dumps the clutch and stalls it. He goes, "You can stall it." And he was so excited that he had built this synthetic manual that was still stallable. And that
he programmed the flaw in.
He programmed,
or the ability to error.
Yeah, and that was so funky. And then the other thing is the fact that it's a 9-speed gearbox, and sport and race modes use different ratios from those 9 speeds. They choose an optimized 6th. I just think if you're gonna do something like that, he has certainly figured out a way to make jaded folks like myself go, "Oh my God, you're just insane."
Yes.
That's that was something that really blew my mind. What else is there anything else in the greater supercar world that's really impressing you right now? Maybe what Ramatz is doing with their electric cars or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's one of the most clever guys on the planet, Mate Ramatz. I've got a lot of respect for him. But I don't fully agree with the fact we're ready for a full electric supercar yet. I don't think the time is there. I think we need the next level of battery technology. I think we need to get down to call it a proper supercar. They are unbelievable in a straight line. They really are. But from a vehicle dynamics point of view, I think we need to get electric supercars down to under the 1,500 kilo mark, really, before we start getting serious about it. Yeah. But I do really respect what the guy's done. You know, it's he's probably the best out there when it comes to that sort of thing.
Did you get to have a go in the Navara? Did you go out in one?
No, I haven't. No, but it's not really my bag, to be honest.
It's not. I totally understand, but if you do get the opportunity, I ran an 8-second quarter mile on the street. I mean, it's not like it will suck your eyeballs into the back of your head, and that's fun.
I've driven a Tesla S, and that's amazingly entertaining in a straight line. But after half an hour,
you just have a headache.
Maybe not so much.
I get it. I'm with you with the sports cars, the weight, the shifting, the revs. My priorities are in line with yours, but still, it's Running eights on the street is worthy of a certain amount of respect, for sure.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
As I said, it's got massive respect from me.
Yeah.
But whether it's the right sort of vehicle for me personally, don't think so.
Well, it's not going to be number 39 in the collection, that's for sure.
No.
Well, it has, again, been such a treat to have you on the show. Thank you for sharing your time. The car looks amazing. One day, please, can I drive one for like 10 minutes?
You're going to have to, because that engine, forget whether it's 50 or 33, it really makes no difference. When we started this with Cosworth 4 years ago, we hoped, and I didn't say it was, I said we hoped this would be the best road car engine so far. Now that I've driven 50 a lot, I can absolutely categorically state it is the best road engine I've ever driven, and by a long, long way. It's just the torque, not so much the revs, funny enough, and the sound, those are brilliant, but the torque delivery is just unreal.
Just one more question before you go. It's very hard to make a very high performance engine that revs to 12 and makes crazy power. But is it harder to make an engine do that, or do that and also be civil enough to just use as a car?
Yep, that's the trick. That's the trick. I mean, in the old days when I was growing up, you had power and revs or torque.
Yeah.
Back 60s, absolutely. There was nothing in between. You either had a slower revving engine would make bags of torque, or you did, a sort of 60s Ferrari that was a bit chuggy low down, but once it got over 5 or 6, it came alive. This engine is just mind-boggling. I find myself driving T50 through villages and fifths, at 1800 revs. And when you want to floor it to overtake somebody, you don't even change gear.
It's amazing. And I imagine with modern radiators, modern electronic fan controls, modern, airflow monitoring, things like, overheating in traffic or idling in a hot climate for hours on end are no longer a concern, whereas maybe they were in the 70s or 80s.
Not at all, yeah. And we've driven this thing in Sweden for a month, and we've driven it in Abu Dhabi in summer on a racetrack, so we've done the extremes.
Is there a snow tire fitment?
No, there's a winter tire fitment.
Okay. That's probably a good time too. Ice tracks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Gordon, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you for joining us once again. I hope to see you in Pebble Beach in a few months.
Indeed, you will. Yes.
And if you're going to be stateside before then, by all means, have your people call my people, and let's get an in-studio show or something, or a drive up the hill, maybe.
Okay, thanks, Matt. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you to our patrons for asking great questions today. We appreciate it, and we will see you all next week